Welcome to Hiking Adventures with Mark Winfield.
So anyway, I'm Mark Winfield on behalf of Lunenburg County Hikers, and I'm pleased to welcome everybody to our 5th Zoom presentation. The previous 4 presentations were about overnight long-distance hiking on Keji and then some other long-distance trails that our members have done. But tonight is a little bit change of topic. And I'm pleased to introduce my niece, Captain Sarah Winfield, and she is a survival instructor in the Armed Forces Reserves.
So yes, so I have the chat box up. So if any of you have questions as I go, I want this to be really fluid and communicative. So feel free to ask your questions at any time, and we will improvise as we do in the woods. In a survival situation, we have to be quick on our feet. So that's what we're going to do for this presentation, which is explain that this is a survival, spending an unexpected night in the woods. No one goes into the woods expecting to stay there for a prolonged period of time, but sometimes that happens, even though we make our best efforts for it not to. I'll give you an introduction about myself. Topic number 1 is going to be packing list, which goes with your 10 essentials. So I worked at that in. That was actually fairly new to me. That's a new term and a new topic that I hadn't known before. So I am also learning always as I develop my survival expertise. Emergency survival pack, which is what I suggest to my cadets when I teach them survival, to just throw in their bags because you never know if you're going to need them. And technology, and how good and bad that can be in a survival situation. The second topic will be reaction and dealing with fear. Third topic is the 7 enemies of survival that you can experience while you're in the woods. Topic 4 is what to do when you're lost. So that's STOP. So go over that. And then topic 5 is your strategy of survival. So the tasks in order of which you need to accomplish to have the most ideal survival situation. So about me, I am a captain in the military, as Mark mentioned. I do want to have a bit of a disclaimer here that while I am a member of the Canadian Forces, this is by no means a military presentation. I am just doing this on my own free time about the information that I've learned over my large time, I won't date myself too much, but of survival experience. Should you wish to go into a certain area, there are always experts that you can speak to in those areas that I would suggest that you reach out to for before you go on a backpacking or backwoods trip or hike or whatever you want to call it. But so to reach out to those sources, this is very general information about a survival situation. It would be good to reach out to those individual sources if that's just something good to do before you go into the woods. So I did the survival instructor training as a cadet when I was 16. It's a national course that lasted 6 weeks, and it taught map and compass, it taught shelter building, signals, edible plants, fishing, snaring, all of those kinds of things. So true survival techniques. And then I was tested on that at the end of the 6 weeks, having a manifested survival situation where I spent 3 days, 2 nights in the woods on my own, and was basically given the task to survive, which I obviously did, and it was fine. And if you keep these things in mind, then you ideally will be okay as well if this should happen to you. From my training and experience, I put together this presentation. the most important thing will be to, if you find yourself in the situation, and this is what I stress to my cadets every year, is that you remain calm, that hopefully you've taken the right steps before you've gone into the woods, which will be the most beneficial. And those steps will be packing correctly. So I have 3 slides just on packing alone, because those are things that you can really control, and what you bring into the woods with you is going to be an asset. And then also, you should always let someone know that you're going into the woods, and make sure that you give them a time when you're expected to be back. And obviously technology can be very helpful with that too, to give even more details. But just to make sure that you're doing those things before you go in to set yourself up best should the worst happen. So the 10 essentials, I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with these, but I will go through them pretty quickly. So navigation items to bring would be a map, compass, altimeter, GPS device, personal locator beacon, and a satellite messenger. You don't need to bring all of these things. If you're going on a hike that is a short distance with a well-marked path, then these things will not necessarily be needed for every situation. If you're going on a backwoods hike or going into an unmarked trail or area, then these things would be ideal. Obviously, a map of the area, a compass would be helpful, and not just one that's on your phone, but one like an actual true compass that does not require batteries, obviously. That could be very helpful and very durable too, where a phone isn't necessarily and could run out of batteries. And just a side note on that, that if you have a compass that has a mirror on it, so like a sighting mirror that you usually flip open, that is also a very good practical item to bring, because it can act as a signal. So you can use that mirror as a reflective surface. If you say have helicopters, if you are very deep in the woods and there are helicopters looking for you and they're shining lights down at you, you can hold up the mirror and that will reflect up to a helicopter, or alternatively, if there's people looking through the woods and they're shining flashlights, you can hold that up and that would reflect back to them too. So multi-purpose items are always good in the woods. So that's a good thing to bring. An altimeter is good if you have a topographical map. It could give you an idea of where you are in your altitude. And so you would have your lines on the map to map your altitude. So it could give you an idea, say how far you are up a hill, or so on, if you were able to read a map in that way. A personal locator beacon would be a piece of technology, and along with satellite messenger, that are quasi phones, but you can get these separate devices that are really excellent. And then especially for a satellite messenger, those work off of satellites that are government satellites or private satellites, commercial satellites, that will pick up signals and send signals to people who are looking for you, that are able to be used when your cell phone is not able to be used. So those are especially good if you're going into backwoods, where you can't necessarily rely on cellular service, which you really shouldn't necessarily, because I mean, we've all experienced not being able to have cell service in the best areas. So having cell service in the woods or in the deep woods is probably unlikely. If you do, then you're super lucky, but we don't want to rely on luck. We want to make sure that we're prepared. So a headlamp is an excellent light source to bring, both for practicality, because it leaves your hands free, which is excellent. So you can, if you are in a survival situation, you can cook, you can build your shelter, you can do a lot of things while you're wearing the headlamp, and you don't have to hold a flashlight, obviously. Also make sure that you bring extra batteries for that headlamp. Sun protection, so sunglasses, both in the summer and in winter. Snow blindness is a big issue, so make sure that you have a good pair of sunglasses that you always have with you. Sun protective clothing, depending on the climate that you're in, could be very important. You can get some synthetic fabrics that would protect you from the sun's rays, and sunscreen, kind of regardless of the sun exposure. If there's clouds, you can still get a sunburn, and that's kind of the last thing that you want to deal with when you're in a survival situation. So at least SPF 15, and then you can go up to SPF 30, SPF 50, like, and so on. So a first aid kit is very important. You don't have to go and make your own first aid kit. There are plenty of first aid kits that are assembled, and you can just basically, and they're very small, and you can pack them away. If in your experience you find that you may need something else, you can add little things into there. Generally, a pre-packed first aid kit is going to be exactly what you need. You also want to make sure that you have good foot care. So we really want to make sure that if we get blisters, we have the equipment to take care of that. So blisters, so you need Band-Aids, you need polysporin, like an antiseptic cream, and you want to bring insect repellent as well. A knife, so you can go with a simple single flip blade knife if necessary, or a fixed blade. If you have a sheath, then that's fine as well. Also, if you're going into the backwoods, another multi-purpose tool would be a multi-purpose knife that has different, like a screwdriver or scissors or things like that, because that can be helpful for first aid. That can be helpful for repairing your gear. So those are all things that you want to be thinking about, multi-purpose things. Why bring a knife? And all of those separate tools, when maybe it's just better idea to just purchase one of a really practical multi-tool. So you want to be able to make your own fire if necessary. And fire, once again, you want to be very careful with fire. Fire is not to be taken lightly. You want to be aware when you're going into the woods, if there's any burn bans or anything like that, what the climate is like. But if you desperately need one for your survival situation, then you need one for your survival situation, but you're going to be expected to be responsible for it. So that's something that we're going to talk about. But for your packing, you want to bring matches, and you want to make sure that they're waterproof, or if not waterproof, at least in a waterproof container. And then you want to bring a lighter if you have it. You could probably stick with matches and fire starters. You can Google away on fire starters. There's so many. Some of the ones that I bring into the woods with me when I take my cadets and they get trained on is flint and steel, which has a little bit of magnesium on it that sparks up. Steel wool and batteries, which is very easy. They basically, you take the steel wool and you put it on the battery. And we're talking like one of like the 9-volt ones that have like the negative and positive charges that actually stick out, that you would be able to put the steel wool on. And then it would charge up and you would get some sparks. Not a microscope, but a magnifying glass. You can bring a magnifying glass. However, you are at the mercy of the clouds, obviously. I've done it. It takes a long time and you really need a lot of sun to make it work. So I would definitely pack some other things too. On a side note, when I had my cadets at last in trying to make them interested in all of the survival and stuff, I looked up some original items, and there was Doritos are an excellent fire starter, probably because they have a lot of chemicals in them. I don't know all of the science behind it, but they went up very quickly and burned actually for a decent amount of time, and they caught very fast. You can also use cotton balls and Vaseline, which will act kind of as a candle. The cotton will burn quickly and the Vaseline will slow it down, so that will give you some time for you to throw your tinder and kindling on there and get the fire going. Shelter, So we're going to talk about things so like your shelters, your emergency bivvy, a tarp, a space blanket, all of those things could be considered shelters. And we're going to go into a little more into other options that you have for shelters too, but always good to be carrying those things with you. And I mean carrying, when you go into the woods, say you set up camp and then you're going on a hike, your camp tent is not your survival shelter. You should always have your survival shelter on you. So that would be a totally separate pack that you would have. So you would have your shelter at your site, and then you would also have what you would use in a survival situation. So that's something to keep in mind, that you would need both. And then you need extra food. So a day extra than maybe what you had planned, extra water, and extra clothes. So at least another 24 hours worth of clothes, maybe 48 hours. So you can look up all those things as to what like a human would need for food and water, and pack accordingly for those. So the emergency survival kit that we pack is a lot of small items that could be really helpful. And they should be placed in a durable container that's lightweight, waterproof, such as a hard plastic or flexible plastic, so like a Ziploc bag or a metal container. So this is not an exhaustive list, and is designed for an emergency survival kit and what it generally should have. So obviously some crossover here, which is going to be bandages from your first aid kit, aluminum foil, which could be a signal, and also could be practical for possibly food preparation, could be practical for shelter, could be practical for signals, could be practical for so many things. So that's a good one to bring. Antibiotic tablets, candles, cords, cotton balls, an emergency blanket, fish hooks, fish line, should you need to actually get your own food, garbage bags, hard candies. That's going to help save off hunger and trick your mind as well. So maybe it's easier to bring hard candies. And in addition to your food source, like they're not a food source, but it's nice it's a comfort as well to have a hard candy maybe in your mouth while you're working through your task. That's going to help you stay calm. So that's, again, a multi-purpose. Magnifying glass, a mirror, pain relievers, so an Advils, Tylenols, depending on what you can take, just to have, paper, pencil, your personal medication. A lot of people don't think about their personal medication, and when you go for a hike, that's expected to maybe take a couple hours. Maybe you don't bring your personal medication with you, and that's totally normal. But if during that hike you wander off and you end up going 24 hours without that personal medication, what is that going to look like for you? And so you want to think about that if that's going to be a need that you bring. Resealable plastic bags, safety pins, sewing needles to help you repair any gear, thread, tweezers, water purification tablets, waterproof matches, and a whistle. A whistle is actually going to be a really effective signaling tool because it's going to travel a lot further than your voice. So a whistle is going to be a really good thing to have, and it's so small, so light. So I would always recommend going into the woods with a whistle. That's a really important one. So technology, so cell phones are wonderful to have, but certainly should not be depended on. If it works, that's amazing. That's going to be a great benefit to you. And if you do bring it, then you want to make sure that you bring an external battery. So you can get like a very small, they sell them everywhere at this point, and it can be very small, but that's going to add life to your phone, possibly even a day, which would be amazing. And then also, of course, to connect those, you need to bring your charging cord. So make sure you're thinking about, you might have the battery and you might have the phone, but if you don't have the charging cord, you need that too. So you want to think through every situation. So what you're going to experience in the woods is obviously right off the bat is you're going to be experiencing fear because you are alone. And this is probably an unfamiliar situation, and there's going to be some panic there. So it's the normal reaction, and it can help and hinder a survival situation depending on how you deal with it. The negatives of fear that you will experience is that you could feel some hopelessness, a decreased self-confidence, and reducing the will to survive. And those are all things that could happen if you let the fear take hold and control the situation. If you look at the positives of fear, it can release a lot of adrenaline and can make you work harder, in fact. So those are some positives of fear, which could increase your strength and stamina and also reduce pain. So if you're injured and you have that adrenaline going, then you're going to be able to work through an injury. But we are going to cover that you do want to take care of your injuries, but it is going to help you kind of get through your task. So dealing with fear, how we're going to do that is by accepting the fear. So you are in the woods, you are alone, and you are accepting the fear that is a natural reaction. And it's going to lead to productive behavior. And so fear can greatly decrease the chances of survival. So the way that you deal with that is you have the confidence in yourself. So from this presentation, from the research that you've done before you go into the woods, from the alternative sources that you have reached out to, you have confidence in yourself and your knowledge. You have confidence in your equipment because you took the time to really pack your equipment well. So you're in the situation and you've prepared for it. And you're going to concentrate on getting the job done. So now you're in the woods and now you have some things that you need to accomplish. So one task at a time, and I'm going to give you that list of things that you need to accomplish so that you can just focus on those, and it's going to make the time pass, and it's going to make the situation seem a lot easier to deal with. In addition to fear, these are going to be some feelings that you get or things that happen to you or things that you need to deal with. And these are the 7 things that are going to the most kind of waylay your survival success. So the first is pain. And pain is in nature's way of identifying a problem. However, pain can subside if you're preoccupied with other things. So we're going to give you those tasks to work on and work through the pain if it's a manageable pain. Once a person gives into pain, it weakens their drive to survive, unfortunately, and a special effort should be made to keep an individual hopes up and keep them working if they're able. So we're talking about like different levels of injury here and what you're able to do if you're in a group versus if you're individual by yourself. And what you're going to accomplish and what you're going to maybe need to take care of somebody else. That could also be another task that needs to get accomplished. So that's to deal with pain. You need to be aware that if you give into that pain, then that could hinder your survival. Cold. Cold lowers the ability to think and to complete necessary tasks in survival. Focusing on being cold can interfere with your goal, and cold can numb both your mind and your body. So you're going to be not thinking clearly, and you're not going to be accomplishing the tasks that you need to in the right amount of time. And it can also lead to serious medical problems, obviously, depending on if it's snow or hypothermia or anything like that is going to really hinder you. So you have to find ways to stay warm, like building a fire, getting dry, and layering your clothes and keeping busy. Moving around will help to keep you warm. So you don't just want to sit. You want to move around, do your tasks, stay focused, and that will help you stay warm. Thirst. Water is vital to survival, obviously. Dehydration can lead to serious medical problems and can eventually also be fatal. Even when thirst is not extreme, it can still dull the mind. So you need to drink regularly and try to find alternative sources of water if you're looking at a longer, prolonged stay in the woods. Water filtration would be advised. So you can do that in kind of a different ways. You can have your purification tablets, but if you truly just want to filter water, there are things that you can buy. Alternatively, you can also make your filters. If you are in a very dire situation, one of the things that we were taught was to even take a sock and have different levels of uh, rocks. So you would start with very large rocks to take out, and you would be wringing out the sock, and then you would take out medium rocks, and then you would wring it through to try and then very, very small, and you would get down to like the finest that you could find. That's not going to take out bacteria. That's not going to take out anything like that. You would still need to use hopefully some kind of purification, but a filtration system would probably be beneficial if you really do need some extra water while you're out there. Hunger. Hunger is dangerous because it can lessen the ability for rational thought. Both thirst and hunger can increase a person's susceptibility to weakening effects of cold, pain, and fear. So again, if you're thinking about how hungry you are or how thirsty you are, then all those other things are going to come in as well. So you have to keep a strong effort on all fronts to keep the 7 enemies of survival at bay. Because once you let one in and start to crack away, then they're all going to start to seep in. So it's something to be aware of. Prolonged hunger can lead to serious medical problems as well and eventually be fatal. So you need to manage your food supplies. If you need to, set snares, fish, or collect edible plants. We're going to cover kind of that in a couple of minutes, but as far as edible plants are concerned, do not eat anything unless you are 100% sure you know what you're eating. And I would also recommend a test, which we'll go over, just to make sure that you don't then poison yourself when you're in the woods, because that's going to hinder your survival. Fatigue. Even a moderate amount of fatigue can reduce your mental ability. So fatigue can make people careless and easy to adopt feelings of not caring if you're tired. So this is one of the biggest dangers of survival. While fatigue can be caused by overexertion, it may also be caused by hopelessness or by losing sight of your goals, and dissatisfaction or frustration or boredom. And fatigue could also represent an escape from the situation. So if you just want to just lay down and just close your eyes and just forget about the situation, that's giving into fatigue. So that's important to be aware of. That yes, you do need to rest, and that is important, and you should watch your exertion levels, but you should generally, when you are able, to set goals and to stay busy in a survival situation. And then at night, obviously do the sleep that you need. And boredom and loneliness kind of coincide together. So you are now, the boredom and loneliness are the final 2 enemies of survival, and they are perhaps the toughest. And can mainly because they are unexpected. Some of us may go into the woods thinking, I can spend 24 hours by myself. That's not a problem. But when you're in a situation that is unfamiliar and scary, the boredom and loneliness can really get into your brain maybe more than they would if you were, say, at home, in the comfort of your home and just not talking to anybody for 24 hours. So those are very natural feelings, and you need to be aware of them. So to make sure that they don't, again, crack through and let these 7 enemies of survival start to come in. And there are very easy ways to deal with these. Say you've accomplished all of your tasks that you need to get done for a survival situation. One thing that was recommended for us, because we were out for 3 days, and obviously I built my shelter, I did my fires, I did my signals, I set up everything that I needed to. So then what? Then you make camp crafts. And it was like you could take sticks and make a picture frame or carve something with your knife, just something to keep your mind busy that it might seem so pointless now when we're talking about it, but could actually be something that just keeps your mind going and off of the situation. So it could anything even trivial can be very helpful in these situations. Some things are very low impact as well. So they're going to keep your mind busy and also letting your body rest. So those are great things to think about and do. I think one person who's on their solo made like a face on a stump that they actually talked to for those 3 days and just had conversations with, and that apparently was very helpful. So something like Castaway having Wilson, like that doesn't come from nowhere. That's actually a survival principle that if you are having conversations, if you are talking out loud, then you're going to feel more reassured and more comforted. So something to keep in mind. So you're in a survival situation. This is when you initially find yourself lost in the woods. So we are going to stop. So stop stands for stop, which is literally stop and sit down. Think calmly about your situation. Observe. So you take stock of what's around you, and then you plan your next move. So specifically talking about the think. So once you've calmed yourself, you calmed your mind, you need to think about your situation, your location, and how you got there. Sometimes all it takes is to just stop for a moment and to calm yourself, to retrace your steps. So other times though, you need to prioritize your basic needs. So you're determining what you need to do first. Usually this means getting a fire going or putting together a shelter or something like that. Another consideration is to think about how long you've gone, how long you've been out in the woods, and how long it may be before someone comes looking for you. So if you have a watch and you've said, I'm going to be out of the woods by 5 p.m., I will be home. And you're looking at your watch and you're seeing it's 4 o'clock. So by 5, 6, 7, hopefully at the latest, someone is going to be aware that you are not home. So that is 2 hours. So you keep yourself busy for that time. Someone knows where you are. So those are the things that you're thinking about. You're like, okay, maybe this isn't going to be a very long time because I've done the right steps before. So maybe I'm here for 2 hours, maybe I'm here for 4 hours, maybe it won't be the whole 24 hours, but they could start looking for you pretty soon if you've done the right things. And then on the alternative, if you haven't done any of those things, then it might be a much longer stay out in the woods for you, unfortunately, and you need to think about that too. You need to make a reasonable and accurate determination of your situation. So how late in the day is it? What is the weather like now? What is it likely going to turn into in a few hours? For example, generally we advise to stay put in an area, but if it is an unsafe area that you're in, you need to observe the things around you and you might need to move. Hopefully not too far, but you may need to move to make sure that you have a safe place to stay for a prolonged period. This step also involves taking a mental and physical inventory of your resources available to you. So what gear you have in your pockets and in your pack, to look around you and try to ascertain the natural resources that you have around you. So as far as shelter is concerned, or a stream nearby, or things like that, where you could obtain water, or a means to disinfect it if you have them. You're looking around if there's any wildlife trackings around, so you don't want to be in a high traffic area for animals, so that's something to be aware of. And again, even if you are hungry and you do observe that there are some items there, then you want to make sure that you don't eat them unless you absolutely are in a dire circumstances and have no more of your own packed food. Then that is possible and you could do that. And then you need to plan. So your plan is when you calm down, you're calm about the situation and you've observed what's around you, and then you're able to make a concrete and informed plans of action. And of course, this plan will vary with any situation, but generally speaking, it will involve making the decision to either stay put or keep moving. So these are the things that you're going to need to accomplish. This is your pattern to have a successful survival situation. So this pattern is presented in a particular sequence that I'm giving here. That is generally how you're going to go through your situation. However, this pattern can vary depending on the situation and the changing of priorities. For an example, if you are lost while hiking with a group, the first priority of the pattern could be to signal, like blow a whistle or something like that, because there are people nearby. So you wouldn't jump and do first aid, fire, shelter, signal if you think that maybe people are a half an hour or less away from you and could possibly still hear a whistle. You're just going to jump right to signal and start blowing that, because that's going to be your best chance to hear people, for people to still hear you while they're in your range. So something to be aware of, and hopefully you would have come to that conclusion with your STOP. But going in this and saying that, okay, first we need to deal with first aid, then we need to deal with warmth and food. So we're going to deal with fire. Then we're going to deal with our comfort and somewhere to stay, that's shelter. Then we're going to try to let people know where we are because they're going to be looking for us soon. So that's signal. And then we're going to deal with food and water. So that's our strategy of survival, and I'm going to go through each one of those and how to do them. Your first task will be addressing your first aid concerns. Treating injuries can be a benefit, can prevent worsening or reducing pain, and allows you to move on to other survival tasks. So if you have a blister, you put a Band-Aid on that. If you have a broken body part, then hopefully you can splint that and maybe try to keep going, or evaluate your situation and try to do the best that you can. But you do need to take care of your first aid first, so that you can move on with your other tasks and your first aid isn't going to hinder you. Fire. So fire is going to be very important. Fire serves as many functions and is good for warmth. Is actually going to build your morale. I'm sure we've all sat around a campfire and felt how cozy it is and lovely, and it makes it feel a bit like home. So when you have a fire started in your survival site, then that is going to be helpful to you. So that's an excellent morale boost, and it provides a sense of security as well. And it's going to also keep animals away. So it could, and it's also a signal, can help you purify water by boiling, and it can cook your food. So those are all great things that fire is going to do for you. And that's why it's really important and really quite at the top of your survival strategy, because once you get a fire, then you also lit a fire in you, and you can get all of your other tasks done. And knowing that that fire is going to stay, it's going to stay lit. You have your fire starters, you had your kindling, and it's also going to allow you to have a task that you need to keep going to maintain that fire. So you're going to have to keep collecting firewood, putting it by the fire to make it dry out. So that's going to be an ongoing task that you need to maintain that fire, and that's going to keep you busy. And you should always use caution while building your fire. So you want to make sure that you're not going to cause any forest fires. Also, something to be aware of is roots underneath. If that fire is burning for a prolonged period of time, that can heat the roots of a tree and could possibly start smoking through the trees. So you want to make sure that you're not in a heavily rooted area either. So you want to have a very flat surface, and you want to make sure that you've even dug out a little bit to make sure that there's nothing underneath that would cause concern, and put up a protective barrier as well. If you're going to put the fire, if your plan is to have the fire at the entrance of your shelter, it should be a safe distance away. But then you could also, on the other side of the fire, build a little heat wall. So whether that's with rocks or something like that, to force the heat towards your shelter. So it doesn't need to be right at your shelter door to keep you warm while you're in your shelter. You can build that wall to direct the heat to you. Because obviously you don't want to set your shelter on fire either. That wouldn't be good. So shelters. So what you're taking in with you is going to be obviously your man-made shelters. It's going to be your tents. It's going to be your tarps. It's going to be things like that. that you very easy to do, and it's going to be built in no time, and you're going to have a great shelter that's going to keep you dry and safe. Natural shelters are things that we're going to find out in the woods without having to construct them. So that's going to be caves. Obviously, you want to be cautious of caves. Make sure there's no wildlife in them or anything like that. So natural sources, so caves, fallen trees, if they're very sturdy, you want to make sure of that. Things like that you can use as your natural shelters. Improvised shelters are going to be shelters that you build. So say you have a tarp, you can build a hoochie, which is a shelter that you have two trees, and then you run a cord across, and then you put your tarp over, and so the middle of the tarp is now on the cord, and then you pin down each side. So it's basically a tent in between two trees. So that's something that you can build. When I was on my survival expedition, I had an A-frame. So that was basically I took two sticks and lashed them together and then had a long pole going down, so that it was obviously tall enough for myself to lay inside. And then I would put boughs along that long pole to be water resistant. So those are two options that you can build for your own shelter. You could also build a lean-to, which is, again, two trees with a branch across that you've lashed to both of the trees, and then you build down one side. So those are three options for improvised shelters that you could build by yourself with the items that you bring into the woods. And you can either use your tarps, or as I said, if you need to, you can use boughs and just load those like green boughs on. And those are going to act as water resistance. And if you have them thick enough, then it's going to keep even rain off you. It worked very well for me. And the location of your shelter, you want to make sure that you're not, say, at the bottom of a hill. You don't want water runnage to go into your shelter in the middle of the night and to wake up in a lake. That would be not ideal, and you'd be cold, and then you'd be starting right back at zero for your survival, for your strategy of survival. You want to make sure, again, that you're not near any animals. And while it may be convenient to have your shelter near a water sources also have animals at them, as well as bugs. So you don't want to have your shelter too near a water source, because you don't want to get involved in any of that. And then the size of your shelter, you want to keep it to you. So when you're building your shelter, some people go and build large shelters thinking that they're going to keep all of their stuff in there, and it's going to be very spacious and luxurious. And that's not what we're looking for in a survival situation. We're looking for to keep your shelter, if it's whether it's man-made or improvised, as small as possible, because that's going to allow your body heat to stay with you. So make sure that you're keeping your shelter just to your size. Like literally, I said, when I made my A-frame, I was able to curl up in there, and my feet was at one end, my head was at one end, and then so I was very warm and very enclosed. So that's what we're looking for when we're building a survival shelter. What about a snow shelter? Does snow insulate on the ground, or should you remove it? I admittedly don't know a lot about as far as snow shelters are concerned. There is a separate course through the military that I have not had the experience of taking, but I have heard, obviously, if you build up a snow shelter around you, that is insulating. So, but you want to make sure that you're going to build something that's solid and that's not going to cave in on you. So if there's enough to build it up around you, that would probably be good. But if it's just on the floor and you're like not the floor, but the ground, then you might be better off to dig that out and get as close to the ground as possible to keep your body heat insulated with you. But definitely something to look into as far as snow shelters. That's something I don't have a lot of experience in, but something to look into. Thank you. Okay, signals. So signal fires our first option. We're going to make it, that's one of our priorities. So you already have your fire, and there are different kinds of fire. Just your cooking fire, as we'll call it, is a form of a signal fire. There are other types of signal fires. So you could make a tripod signal fire, which is more off the ground. It's a more obvious built piece that's going to draw attention, and you could build that in a field. So you're going to have your cooking fire with your next to your shelter that's going to give you warmth and comfort. And then if you're in an alternative location, say there's a field close by, you could build a tripod fire that's going to burn off the ground, and you're just going to keep adding boughs to that, and it's going to breed a lot of smoke. So that's what we're looking for signal fires, is smoke. We want to have, and if you put green boughs on your fire, that's going to create a lot of white smoke, and that's going to be really great to see. So those are things you want to keep in mind. That the cooking fire, yes, anybody's going to see a cooking fire if it's close, if they're close to you. But your signal fire with all of that smoke and everything is going to be what's going to actually draw people who are further away and get them closer to you. So that's why we want separate, a signal fire to be separate and apart, something to think about. Also, audible signals. Those are going to be like the whistle that I mentioned. Those are going to be great things to have that aren't going to exert a lot of energy, and that you can just blow in that whistle and people are going to hear you. And you can do that while you're doing your other tasks. So that's going to be an easy thing to do at the same time, and be very efficient. There are also sound machines that you could get. So if you want to purchase those separate and aside, then those are going to be good too. If you have your phone, and I mean, your phone can make all types of sounds, can play music, can do anything. So you're going to have that as well, but keep in mind the battery life. But if that is your only option to have some kind of audible signal, then that could be your option. And then visible signals. So again, say we have a flat piece of land that it has no tree coverage. We could make something out of stones or something that's contrasting colors, say we have a blanket that is reflective, or a piece of really bright clothing. We can make SOS, we could make help. We could do all those things if someone is looking for us aerially. So those would be helpful to direct somebody to us. You can make an arrow to show that that you're not necessarily at that location, but point to the area that they would be able to find you. Because that's the other thing. If you can't stay at your signal location, but I don't recommend leaving a signal fire unattended, obviously. So if you have a visible signal that you're able to build and then you go back to your shelter, then it should direct somebody to where they're going to be able to find you. So that's important to keep in mind. And food and water. So food and water are going to be, you can survive without water for a few days. It's going to be very uncomfortable, obviously, if you have an insufficient amount of water with you, and you aren't able to find a water source or purify or anything like that. If you do that filtration that we talked about to get everything as much as possible out of the water, so like an improvised filtration, or if you have a filtration system with you and then you boil the water, then that's going to be a great water source for you. And then survival without food, that can actually be a couple of weeks. Again, it's going to be very uncomfortable. So we want to make sure that we bring food with us more than we think that we'll anticipate that we'll need for the planned amount of time that we are in the woods, just in case, because it will be uncomfortable, but it is possible. Both will result in reduced ability to concentrate and loss of mental clarity and energy deprivation. So you should always purify any groundwater that you have. Rainwater is an excellent source. So consider making something that could collect rainwater if you're out. If you think that it's going to rain, then that's going to be a good thing to have, and it's going to take low energy. So again, that's what we're looking for, is low energy sources that we can draw from, and you're going to have a great water source with that. And never eat anything that you can't identify. So if desperate, there's the gradual test. So you start with, say, for example, you find a berry that you are interested in eating. This is going to go over some time that you do some gradual testing. So you're going to start with a very sensitive area. So you're going to rub it on a sensitive area, and you're going to give it some time to see if you have a reaction. And you can look up the specific times. I think it's at least an hour or something like that. So you want to make sure that you're giving yourself substantial time to have a reaction to these foods. So you do that. Okay, no reaction. You could try it on your lip. Okay, no reaction. Like, this is a gradual test that we are getting closer to ingesting. So you can do this, and to make sure that you're not going to have a reaction to these things. And then of course you want to eat in moderation. Once you find that you aren't having reactions, you eat a little bit, you ingest a little bit, and you give that, I would say, even 24 hours, because we do need time for our body to process these things. And so a little food can go a long way. If you really have no food and this is your source, then you've had a little food, you see what it does, and then you can eat a little more. But everything in moderation. And obviously you want to manage your food source, this new food source that you found. So you don't want to eat it all at once either, but you want to make sure 100% that it's safe. Okay, so that's my presentation. So if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Or I think it took about an hour, so that's generally good. And I hope that you all enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed putting it together for you, and having some non-mom time was wonderful, and something else to focus on. That has been lovely for the last week. So I appreciate you all attending and listening, and I hope that you got something from this that will be helpful, but not too
Sure.
helpful.
I don't have a question yet, but I do want to say it was excellent, very, very informative. But the question somebody had asked about snow shelters, I think I'd read something, don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure I read this, that you could keep the snow under you, but then you build a little bit of airspace and put boughs on top of that,
Oh, okay.
allowing for a little bit of airspace because it insulates.
She worked very hard to get lost.
People don't realize they can get lost just leaving the trail
Yeah.
and going, 50 feet into the woods to go to the bathroom. Like, there's been people lost in those situations. So
Yeah, it happens, unfortunately, and can happen to the best of us. So you just need to be prepared as best as possible.
I just thinking what Mark was just saying, maybe that's more reason to keep your whistle right on you if you did go into the woods to use the bathroom, for instance. Because often your whistle's tied to your backpack or something.
Yeah, that's going to draw somebody right back to you. That's going to be your first strategy. And hopefully only 10 minutes have passed, and then you're right back with everybody.
So on behalf of Lunenburg County Hikers, thank you very much to Sarah Winfield for an excellent survival presentation. We hope that none of us will need it.